The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. Each week we introduce you to something new, something that'll make you think, something that might change your life. Here's this week's author interview on the Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI.
Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is Jamie Grace. Jamie is a two-time Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter, speaker, and actress. She's amassed millions of streams on Spotify and hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube. We're going to talk this morning about her new book. It's called Finding Quiet, My Journey to Peace in an Anxious World. Jamie, so appreciate your time this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. By the way, I love Canada. I just wanted to tell you.
We've had you here a few times with Toby Mac.
Right, definitely. Yeah. I get excited when I get to I'm like, oh, look at that from my childhood. I get to chat with them again. So it's always really cool.
Let's start at the age of 11 when you were officially diagnosed with anxiety as well as Tourette syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. How did Jamie Grace, the kid, and the burgeoning teenager at that point, process all of that? What was life like for you during those grade school years?
Yeah, it was definitely really difficult. I mean, no matter what you go through with your health at that age, just growing up in general can be difficult because you're dealing with navigating friendships and, family relationships, and school might be really exciting or it might be really challenging. So there's already so much stuff going on in my mind, but to then be faced with those type of diagnoses, and it was challenging because I was, especially with my Tourette syndrome, which is a tic disorder, my tics were so out of control. I was just physically just moving all of the time. It was painful. It was frustrating. It was uncontrollable. So that was frustrating, but then to be given a diagnosis of something that doesn't have a cure and doesn't have a direct medication to help it, that was probably the more frustrating part. I'm just grateful for my family, to be honest, because they allowed me to process how I needed to, and just, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset about this. It's okay to be sad. Throughout those years, I was given the freedom to feel what I needed to feel, and that was really helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the medication. You felt a certain tension, and you talk about this in the book throughout your life in terms of wanting to be on meds, wanting to not be on meds. What have you learned? What have your own experiences taught you about the good and the bad that goes along with meds versus no meds?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that I've had to learn is that in life you're going to go through different seasons. It's okay to trust the people around you as you go through those seasons. So, from ages 9 to 15, medication was kind of my only option because I was so sick and we just had to experiment with something. But it was also really terrible, to be honest. I mean, the medications weren't great for me. It was frustrating. It was sometimes making me sicker than actually making me better. So that was really challenging. But then there was a time in my early 20s when I went back on medication, and that medication actually really helped me focus, and it really helped me calm down. I didn't stay on it for a long time, but it was really helpful in the season that I had it. So I think that that's one thing that I've had to just come to grips with. Different seasons are going to bring about different challenges. God has put great doctors and therapists in our lives so that whether we're on medication, we're not on medication, we're going through therapies, we're joining different church groups, whatever that day-to-day coping looks like, it's okay for those seasons to embrace whatever those coping skills look like in that season.
Oh, man, it's so tricky, though. Like any regular kid, you grew up with a lot of dreams of all the things you wanted to do, but gymnastics was for you at top or near the top of your list. Tell us more about that and the when and the why of letting go of that dream and how it led ultimately into an even deeper passion for music.
Right, yeah. I was in love with gymnastics from a very young age. I've always been very energetic. And I was actually pretty good at gymnastics. And so that was I spent a lot of my time in the gym. I loved watching the Olympics, seeing Dominique Moceanu in '96. She was so young and inspiring, and that was just something that I wanted to do. My parents worked really hard to be able to afford time for me at the gym. I spent as much time there as I could, learning new things and practicing at home as well. But with the nature of my physical tics, I wasn't able to continue in gymnastics. And especially because at the time I was doing gymnastics, we didn't know what it was. So we weren't able to really figure out coping mechanisms, to even continue gymnastics because we didn't even know why I was ticking so much. It was this uncontrollable thing that was happening when I was on the balance beam and, a potential danger to myself and those around me. So I had to quit the one thing that I loved the most. I loved a lot of things, but that was the one thing I loved the most. And it's crazy because sometimes when God not only closes a door, but literally puts us in our houses and then closes the door, it can feel like everything is falling apart. For me as a little girl, of course, I'm not going to lie, I went through depression and a really difficult time. But being in my home, with nothing to do but be sick for a few years, eventually led me to discovering new dreams and new hopes and new passions. And I'd always liked to sing, but I fell in love with it in a whole new way when I was just sitting at home doing nothing. Started writing songs and making YouTube videos. So I don't know how God does it, but even when it feels like he's shutting everything down around us, it's no, he might be trying to tell us something. He might be doing something with this. God really showed up and showed me something else to dream about.
In my favorite chapter called Competition versus Community, you express something of a distaste, if I can call it that, for the underlying pressure to compete that seems to be ingrained into the fabric of the music industry sometimes. Take us behind that curtain. Is there too much pressure on artists to write radio hits or sell a certain number of records, that sort of thing?
I think that there can be too much pressure sometimes. I definitely believe that I'm a good businesswoman and I enjoy the professional side of many things, but I think our intention can get kind of mixed up if we're not careful. I'm always intrigued when, if you're working hard I was watching a documentary about a young artist who was talking about a year that she did not win a Grammy Award and how this made her feel like the next album had to be better so that she could win the award. And I was just sitting there practically thinking, well, what if every talented artist wants to win every year? That's just not practical for everybody to be the best. So it's really interesting. I think that our intention needs to be the reason why we write music and the reason why we share our music. And again, I believe in making good business practices, so I definitely believe that there are times where we have to evaluate and say, okay, how is this financially sustainable? What is this tour looking like? How can we promote to sell more tickets? So of course I believe that's a huge part of it, but I don't think that that pressure needs to be in the spirit of being better than anyone else, because as much as it might put us at number one and at the top of the charts, it's what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose a soul? It's at some point, if you're the best, well, then what? What are you living for? You became the best. What do you do now? Mm-hmm. You just die? It's not incredibly practical. So, yeah, I remember the first time a female artist told me that her label told her that until she was as big as Jamie Grace, she wasn't worth anything to them. And I wish that I could say that only one female artist has told me that. It makes me cringe to think that, because I never sought out to be the best. If someone says that I'm the best at something, then thanks. I appreciate that. But there are many things that I'm not the best at. So I don't want anybody to try to be like me, and I'm not trying to be like anybody else. I have a reason why I write my songs, a reason why I share those songs. And I think if we all operate with that mentality, while, again, still thinking about our businesses and making it make sense, I think that's much better than trying to be the best at something, because we can't all be the best. It's simply not practical.
So much more in the book. You have a great chapter on friendships near the end and how to spot a real friend. Your final chapter, though, is about purpose, and I want to close there. It goes way beyond, of course, anything that happens on a stage. What is Jamie Grace's purpose as you see it today?
I truly believe that my purpose right here, right now, is really to pull back the veil of what anxiety means, and how when we can find that peace and quiet in our own lives, then we can truly start to hear God's voice and to move and to operate in a way that embraces who he made us to be. We all worry. We all have fears. We all have frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are human. Like, those things are feelings. They're okay. When the Bible is telling us not to have those things, I don't think it's saying like, oh, you guys are bad for being afraid. I think it's saying, hey, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to feel worried. You don't have to feel overwhelmed. There's a safe space for you. So let's truly just welcome this awkward, crazy, weird season as something that God is going to work even through this.
Finding Quiet, My Journey to Peace in an Anxious World. Jamie Grace, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Really enjoyed the book, enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Jamie.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. To find out more about this week's bookmark or hear the author interview again or to discover previous books highlighted on the Wednesday Bookmark, visit bookmark.chri.ca.